This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
Every cannabis company has its own unique set of needs, and one size definitely does not fit all. Compared to other software systems on the market, when you choose Regrow as a strategic business partner, you'll get all aspects of regulatory compliance built in, with the added value of workforce management, inventory, SOP management, and reporting and metrics that allow for companies to scale successfully. Basically, Regrow serves as the single pane of glass view into your entire supply chain. They do this by automating manual tasks, reducing costs, and avoiding shortages by creating dynamic workflows that maximize yields and increase profitability for your business. So if you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, you can find Regrow at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Sam Godds. He's the CEO at Connected Cannabis Co. Sam Godds, thanks for coming on today, man. How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you today, man, because, you have a really interesting background. You, from what I understand, you co-founded Box, a cloud storage platform, which, if you're in business or you're doing any type of file sharing, you've definitely used that platform. So talk to me a little bit about your background there and then how you entered the cannabis industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started Box with three other friends back around 2005, 2006. We all dropped out of college and grew it from the four of us to a few thousand employees worldwide. Took it public in 2015. And I led that as head of technology for the whole time I was there. Around 2017, 2018, decided to take some time off, look for the next thing I wanted to work on, looked at a bunch of different companies, spaces, industries, and I personally always had a really deep passion for craft and artisan and premium consumer goods. So spirits, wine, coffee, chocolate, like I love going to Napa and just being the annoying person who asks way too many questions and just doesn't let the person go until I understand every single detail of how that single, specific bottle of wine came to be. And you said that word, wait, I heard someone else say that word in different context. What does that mean?
Yeah. Or what type of sedimentary soil was that it was grown in? The elevation was what? Yeah.
Exactly. There was one tasting room where they had samples of the different soils on in the tasting room. I was just so fascinated and I had to learn more. So I've always loved that stuff. And I had no idea cannabis could be like that, could be produced at that level and have that level of sophistication until I met Caleb, who is the founder of Connected Cannabis. He started in 2009. So ancient history in commercial cannabis terms, started in Sacramento. In 2009, shortly after 2010, started growing in a commercial environment, which is completely different than the way most cannabis has been grown, which is in garages or houses or things like that over the last several decades. So he has a crazy amount of experience. And when I met him in summer of 2018, which is when I just met him through a friend of a friend, I was just looking for something to get really excited about and to invest my time and energy into. And when I met him, I was just blown away. In the first 30 seconds, when he told me that for years, they had been selling out as one of the largest cannabis growers in California and tens of millions of dollars in revenue at more than double what everybody else was selling their flower for. And I was like, okay, what's going on? What's the story here? I need to know more. And so I went from doing a couple coffees a week with friends and talking to people and learning about different industries to 80 hours a week overnight. I had to know what was going on with Caleb, Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that must have been like a big data download that you had to get in that short period of time, because of course you're seeing the figures, you're seeing the revenue coming in, you're seeing the quality of the product that they're producing, right? But there's so much education that goes into this also. So did you just kind of hit the books, meet with people, talk, and just
So
yeah,
much education, especially coming from a tech world, right? So
right,
I didn't have any experience in consumer goods. Coming from a Silicon Valley, which generally doesn't have a lot of experience or heavy experience with regulatory bodies or heavy regulatory regimes. So that was a huge learning experience. Not to mention in a space that there were no books to hit. Like to this day, like it's very hard to learn about the cannabis industry.
right,
Um,
right.
I mean, shows like this are probably one of the few sources that you really have, because there's no business case studies. There's no decades long companies that have existed that you can learn best practice from. Everything's changed. I mean, the commercial cannabis, the mature, like a regulated commercial cannabis industry in California is less than 3 years old, or like right around 3 years old. Like that's a very small amount of time for a
Right.
multi-billion-dollar industry to spring out of, right?
Right.
So
Especially when, huge entities like the pharmaceutical and healthcare side aren't involved, and you have like policy involved, regulation, right, at the federal level. So it's
yeah,
just
no, there's never been a space like this with so much growth potential that no incumbent can touch. Right?
right.
No, it's like I think a lot of people don't understand like some real fundamentals about the cannabis industry that break all mental models about business. One is that no incumbent can come into the space because it's still federally legal. So if you have a big business, you're not going to put that business at risk, even if nowadays the practical risk is virtually zero. But the legal theoretical risk for a big established company, their legal teams are telling them, don't even think about it. Or you have to do some crazy Byzantine structure where there's like multiple layers of abstraction between you and the business. It doesn't work. So the incumbents can't come in. And then something, we might talk about later, like interstate commerce is another huge, huge, huge impediment and changes everything. So, but anyway, getting back to kind of
Well,
like,
we could. Oh, go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead and finish your thought.
No, just how I got involved. Yeah, I started learning really quickly. Just drinking from a fire hose is even an understatement. Like I was drinking from a waterfall. Like it was just aggressive. And I just became so fascinated with the space, the potential, just the idea that like, I firmly believe that the most popular ways of growing or consuming or creating cannabis products in 5 years haven't even been conceived of today. Like the amount of change coming is extraordinary, and the amount of potential to be at the forefront of that innovation is nuts. It's so exciting.
So so that fascinates me, right? Because I totally agree with you, and I think you're right. But what I'm curious to see what plays out is the innovations there in terms of like, new genetics, new ways of growing, new formulations, new ways of consuming, right? But the science behind the efficacy of each cannabinoid, it's somewhat there, but we got a long ways to go,
Oh,
right?
it's yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you're fine. And so, I mean, basically, what I'm saying is that we ultimately want those two camps to marry up and talk to each other, right? So that we can really dial in formulations, terpene levels, flavonoid levels,
Yeah.
cannabinoids, right? And so, like, is what you're talking about it more ahead in terms of light years away than the science? And when do we catch up, and how do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's on all fronts, right? It's on how we grow it, how we consume it, how we produce products, how it affects us, how the body reacts to different formulations of cannabinoids and terpenes and everything in between. You know, uh, I think another thing that's really, you don't realize at first is that cannabis, the science around cannabis and cannabinoids and how they affect the body is extraordinarily complex, probably more complex than almost any other thing you can consume, or one of the most complex of anything you can consume. And yet the science is stuck back in the very early 1900s, like 1910s, 1920s, because that's when federal prohibition went into effect. And federal prohibition, yeah.
Hey, Sam, do you mind just sitting back just a little bit?
Oh,
Because
sure.
it's a little muffled. There, go ahead, continue.
Oh, the audio.
Yeah, it's just that you're getting too close to
Okay. How's
yeah,
this? Is this better?
it's fine. Yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. Cool. So the science, right? So do you want to repeat the question or?
So you were talking about all the different compounds and the flavonoids and the terpenes.
Yeah. So the science for cannabis is really stuck back in the 1910s or 1920s because that's when federal prohibition went into effect. So every other plant or crop that we grow in any sort of commercial context has had many decades of fairly advanced science, millions of dollars spent at universities or in commercial environments to study these plants and understand them better and better and how to grow them. None of that's happened for cannabis. So we know very, very, very little. It's to this day, it's super hard to do any cannabis research because of the kind of crazy misclassification, scheduling that occurred at the DEA level. So yeah, we really are on the forefront.
We're on the forefront, exactly. And you talk about like, the challenges when it comes to the research and whatnot due to the regulation. But, let's talk about the challenges of the difficulty of actually cultivating, growing the plant at such a high quality that I know, Connected Cannabis produces, as well as the company that you acquired, Alien Labs, which I want to get into later. Freaking love following their Instagram, man. It's just amazing what they're producing. But tell me about why cannabis is so difficult to grow.
It's a great question. It's easily more difficult than the vast majority of the crops we grow, and it's actually. I was talking with our head of cultivation the other day, who comes from more of a big ag and ag tech kind of background, and we were talking about how cannabis is the first mainstream, consumer good that has so much dependent on the growing process itself, and the growing process itself being so influential in the outcome of the product. So, you think maybe something like wine, so much of it is in the winemaking, the blending, the fermenting, everything that happens after the growing of the grapes. The grapes is just one small piece of it. And there's not as nearly as much complexity in the grape growing as all the other pieces. You can't really come up with another example where the potential for complexity and nuance, and with cannabis, we're talking about everything from the terpene profile, which influence the smell, the taste, really unique, special kind of combinations of flavors you can come up with, the look, the nug structure, the colors, the way that it smokes, the way that it tastes when you consume it, and then ultimately the effect it has on you. Each of these dimensions on their own could take up, an entire consumer good. And here we have all these things combined, and so much is dependent on the growing process. So it's not just about manufacturing it. Like, you actually develop this relationship with the plant where you're trying to understand what it needs, what it wants at different parts in the cycle. And what we found is it's actually very counterintuitive. People who've come in from other industries have expected one thing and seen something else happen compared to other plants and how they grow. So it is a very complex process. Every harvest, especially when you're talking about indoor agriculture, you're controlling every aspect of the environment, which means every aspect of the environment has a potential to have an issue with it, which can take you from a $4,000 wholesale pound of cannabis to a $2,000 wholesale pound of cannabis with one small error out of dozens of things that need to happen in every harvest. Mm-hmm. So it's like you're spinning plates, it's a balancing act over the course, and you're doing like dozens of harvests a quarter. So to get all those things right every single time at the highest level, there's a reason, we're one of the very, very few companies in the world that's producing cannabis at this level.
So, I mean, that makes sense, right? The consistency, understanding the plant, like you said, the strain, the genetics behind it, what it needs, nutrients, all that type of stuff. Is there any other, unique breeding techniques that, Connected Cannabis does? Because I know that y'all charge a premium price for your flower, right? And it's such a competitive market to begin with. So like what is the differentiator here?
Yeah, so everything I kind of just outlined to discuss is primarily around the cultivation side. There's a whole nother side of the coin, which is the genetic side. So that's completely in addition to and separate from the cultivation operations, which requires incredible rigor, consistency, everything. The genetic side is more of an art. It requires taste, it requires an understanding of the consumer base, it requires also a lot of science around what are you breeding, how often, how much. A lot of people I think don't know that we have gone through, we recently did kind of back of the envelope, over 10,000 strains we've bred and popped and like looked at and evaluated.
Are those proprietary, or are those just things that you're researching, R&D type stuff? Like
those are all, it's a combination of both. They're all proprietary and they're all R&D. But my point is, we did 10,000 to come up with a few dozen that we've actually brought to the commercial market.
wow.
So our selection is extremely, extremely strict. A lot of cannabis companies will say we have a proprietary genetics portfolio or something like that, but it's like, do you have a proprietary genetics portfolio that people care about and that there's hype around? And every time you come up with a new strain, it's something the industry hasn't seen before and hits a new demographic or a unique portion of the market. We manage our genetics portfolio like a top tier record label or movie studio or shoe company or something like that, where every month or quarter you're doing releases that hit different like tastes or demographics or markets, and each new strain we release benefits from that incredible cultivation I talked about and the incredible consistency we bring to cultivation. And then it reinforces the brand as well, because now people know, oh, this brand, when they come out with a new strain, I already have all of this, value associated with it, right? So that's our cycle, right? We breed incredible genetics, put them through an insanely rigorous cultivation process, and then release them under our brands, which accrues all the value of that and just goes in a loop.
Right. When you're like, what does that selection process look like? I would imagine it's rigorous, like you mentioned, the cultivation side, right? I mean, 10,000 different genetics, and then you said 12 or something like that, or how many?
A few dozen that we've actually released commercial.
Yeah. So like, what does that process look like? Like, and how long does that take, and who's involved?
I mean, to be fair, it is a lot of tasting parties. So
yeah.
a lot of that.
I want to be part of it. Where do I?
We'll put you on the list for sure. There's a lot of that, but it's fairly rigorous. So we're doing a lot of testing, right? Looking for different cannabinoid and terpenoid levels, not just THC, right? THC is a very small component of the overall picture. But different cannabinoid and terpenoid levels. We set floors and thresholds for what we're looking for across the products or across the strains. And honestly, it's a lot of taste and experience. So Caleb kind of leads this for the connected side. Ted leads this for the alien side. But that selection of what makes it out there is not it's scientific. Science enables it, but to be successful, you also need to understand the industry and what people want and what's hype right now, what's relevant right now. And that's where a lot of, I've spoken to MSOs who are like, oh, we're going to throw $1 million at genetics this year. We're going to solve our genetics problems. Like, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. You can't just buy. It's like you're going to launch the world's greatest, premium fashion brand, the most respected premium fashion brand, and you're going to solve it by just buying designs, like investing money into buying designs. Like, this doesn't work. You need a perspective, you need a worldview, you need an artistic opinion that comes through in what you decide to put out.
Well, so what is hype? Like, what is trending right now? Because, I'm in a state, Texas, we have barely a medical program, right? But I hear things, so I talk with different people, and from what I've gathered, it seems like, and you said it's not. So I'm curious. Like, I hear that there's a big focus on the THC potency in California, and some of these legacy states like Colorado, who have been adult use for a while now. So is it about potency and how much THC is in there? Is it like how beautiful the bud is? Is it like, what is it like, the quality overall?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, measuring potency as a yardstick for quality. It's like measuring whiskey by how much alcohol is in there. It's not really that useful. There's a threshold, right? There's a bare minimum, and we take that very seriously. I mean, I don't think we reduce anything under 20 to 25% THC. So we definitely have a bar that we don't go below. Beyond that, that's at least for, for indoor products, for example. Beyond that, there's a whole universe of kind of flavors, effects. It's hard to describe in so many sentences, like, oh, this is what is hype right now. It's more, it's like one of the techniques we do, for example, is we take a strain that was really high quality and really well known and like really reached a peak, but then may have flamed out for a bit. And we'll take that and we'll cross it with something that's newer and more interesting. So in that case, like Chem D is an example. That was a very good strain, but kind of became overproduced and overhyped, kind of died down a bit, kind of old, it doesn't have as good of a reputation. We've crossed it with Biscotti, created the Chemist, and that strain is now taking off, right? So there's things you can do and play with. It's not so much that there's these macro singular trends, but how are you playing with like the flow of what's going on in the industry and reacting to that?
Got you. And when you come up with a product like the Chemist, right? When you crossbreed, like you talked about and whatnot, how, like, is there a consensus overall about how what the efficacy of it is, like in terms of, how it makes you feel given the terpene profile and flavonoids and cannabinoids that are in it? Or is it kind of across the board because everyone's different?
It's a little of both, honestly, most of the time. There's definitely some things that tend to be common, but at the end of the day, the only way to know for sure how it's going to affect you is to try it. There's definitely a lot of variability person to person. We've seen everything from, this one has a pretty consistent experience through to, 4 people tried this and had 4 radically different perceptions of it. So
got you. Okay. Well, and another thing, just talking about like, flower quality, we see in trends that flower continues to be the dominant preferred way of consumption, right? Especially like during the pandemic, people were smoking more cannabis. So like, what is like Connected's position when it comes to flower versus oil or concentrates?
I mean, we think flower is where everything starts. So flower is the flagship. Flower is the, purest cannabis experience you can have. Whether, you could say smoking or vaping, but consuming the flower in some ways definitely takes the cake. It doesn't get better than that. That said, what we like to do with our other product lines, most other companies will like a vape company, for example, will typically be finding distillate or, maybe some live resin, but usually kind of distillate, which is just a pure chemical extract, mixing it with often non-cannabis terpenes. So botanical terpenes that come from other plants, putting that into a product and selling it at a super low price. We will never do that. We've never done that, selling kind of a distillate product. When we went the cart route and we wanted to find a form factor for our flower that people could consume on the go, right? Like flower does have inconveniences associated with it. Clearly pre-rolls is an easy one, right? But if you want something more discreet, and so we do sell those, although, you still get a better experience from the flower itself, grinding it up right before consuming.
Mm-hmm.
On the cart side, where we landed on, it took us over 9 months of R&D to get this right, but we found a process, a live resin process that took the flower that we sell on the market, we freeze it immediately after harvest before it dries, and we process it to extract basically a concentrate out of it. So it's a blended mix. It's an oil, but it's a blended mix of all the cannabis, cannabinoids, and terpenoids that are in the flower.
Wow.
So our cart is a much, it's not a much higher price, but it's a meaningful premium over other carts because it's made from cannabis. It's not made from a chemical extract and some other, non-cannabis byproducts. So we're really proud, and the reviews we've gotten around the carts has been insane. And to date, we haven't seen another product on the market that's at that level of quality and performance. And you can get that today. So, we went from zero to millions of dollars of revenue in that cart in less than a year, because of the time and energy we invest into making it as true a representation of our flower products as possible.
Wow. That sounds great. Yeah, no. I want to talk to you also about the Arizona market, right? So they're in their first year of sales, after going full adult use. And from what I understand, you have operations, or at least a footing somewhere in Arizona. Is that right?
Before last year, do you mean? Or
currently, like as they're
yeah.
operating?
Yeah. So up until 2020, Connected was exclusively operating out of California. And then, as your viewers may or may not know, you can't, as I mentioned earlier, you can't take cannabis across state lines.
Interstate. Let's talk about that also. Sure. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. So
Interstate
I mean,
commerce.
interstate commerce, the inability to take product across state lines or even across international lines is far and away the number one impediment for the overall growth and productivity of the marijuana, global marijuana market. It is a huge impediment on growth, a huge impediment on advancing the industry forward. It's stifling easily billions of dollars of value by not being able to take across state lines. Because when we launched in Arizona, we effectively had to rebuild our company from the ground up. We had to rebuild cultivation. We had to rebuild production, distribution, everything from end to end, because for us, it's not an acceptable outcome for us to put our brand on someone else's flower that someone else is growing and just call it Connected. We're never going to do that.
Right.
We're only going to put our brand on products that are equivalent, or even right now, Arizona and California for us are a bit competitive internally. We're hearing that some of the Arizona batches are the best weed we've ever put out in the company's history, which is really exciting and really,
wow.
and speaks really well to our ability to scale operationally while we continue to live in this world where you can't take it across lines.
What do you think the key factors are for that? Like, I mean, is it due to the different climate in Arizona? Like, what?
So because our flagship flower is all indoor grown, the climate doesn't have any impact, which is actually a great outcome for the consumer, because we can grow our weed anywhere in the world and produce the same product. It makes it harder for us because we have to provide, again, and control every single variable that the plant sees, from the temperature to the humidity to obviously the nutrients and how it's fed and how it's how the plant consumes nutrients, even down to, we've even had issues where the temperature of the water that the nutrients are delivered in can have an impact on the flower quality. So the level of detail is insane, but the good thing is when you get it down, your scale is unstoppable to some extent.
It's just, you're just churning them out. Yeah. So, well, okay, it being just all primarily indoor then, because I'm sorry, I assumed, there was some greenhouses that were involved.
We do have, when we have an outdoor farm in California, and it's kind of, it's like a lower tier, more entry level product,
okay,
the outdoor flower. And outdoor is where we get a lot of the fresh frozen for the concentrates. But the premium, the flagship indoor flower that we sell, the one where we're able to really guarantee the quality on a consistent basis, comes from an indoor environment.
Got you. Okay. And that makes total sense, like you said, because you have like hyper control over everything, right? Every single variable. And once you dial it in, it's just like boom, boom, boom. You're getting them out like hotcakes. So tell me, how does the consumer behavior compare to Arizona to the California market?
I mean, at the end of the day, what we've seen is, in pretty much every consumer good, premium is premium. Like, if you put the time and energy and focus and effort and resources into producing something great, people recognize it and want to consume it. So we've seen, just as kind of the genesis of a strong cannabis culture in Arizona, as we see in California, and we anticipate that occurring in every cannabis market in the world. Obviously different ones, different degrees, but we think there will always be that, I mean, for sure, there will always be that premium segment of the market. And we intend to basically own that segment in every market we go into.
Mm-hmm. And well, that's a great segue. So 2021, right? I mean, what's Connected's focus for this year and beyond? And are there plans to expand in different states?
Yeah. So I would say this year is twofold in terms of what we're really focused on. One is scale. So we historically, across almost all of our products, have been supply constrained. So we've been selling out, we've been allocating, we've been rationing to dispensaries, especially in the indoor flower. We simply don't have enough. So we're working on scale as well as expansion, right? We expanded to Arizona and are really growing that this year. We're looking at additional markets right now. We don't have anything concrete or to announce today, but we are planning to open in more states, and we're negotiating, different deals right now. So one end is scale, right, in terms of this year, and then the other one is R&D and product development. Like, we intend to always be the best in the world at growing cannabis. So that means investments into breeding, investments to cultivation, into R&D, into different breeding styles, different techniques, different lighting sources, different lighting levels, different spectrums, different nutrient profiles. There's dozens. We spend more time probably on one aspect of the growing process than most companies spend developing their entire process put together. So that's how we create, that differentiation of our product versus others.
When you focus on those different aspects of the indoor grow process, like, are you seeing innovation in all those different things? Like you mentioned lighting, nutrients, like, is all that stuff just like, is there so much innovation happening there, or is it kind of vary among them? Like, in terms of lighting, right? Like I'm sure there's something that's beyond LED now, or I don't even know that world, but I'm sure that there's new types of lighting technology.
Yeah, there are definitely new ones coming out, but it's still generally, I think, LEDs, but the LEDs capabilities are advancing in terms of the customizability of the light spectrum that you're putting out, along with other aspects of how you light, from where you light, different techniques you can use. So I would say, yeah, like lighting is a really big one. The grow medium and methodology is a really big one. We're starting to look at, just different things I can't even really talk about yet in terms of the differentiation that they're going to be able to provide us, but it's a huge focus area. And I think even in places that you wouldn't expect, we're seeing, potential innovation or advancements that we can make.
It's exciting. Any plans to go public at all?
Yeah, at some point. We're focused on product and scale first, and then going public will come, when it needs to. We haven't had a lot of trouble raising capital. In fact, our most recent funding that we actually haven't officially announced yet, but something we're talking with right now, was entirely unsolicited. And came from our existing investors, and came almost as a please take this money because we want you to grow faster. So, we will go public when the time is right. I'd love to be one of the first cannabis companies to go public on a U.S. exchange and trade in the U.S. markets. So hopefully we see some federal action in the next year or two.
I'm hearing rumors that it could be as early as March. In terms of safe banking, I don't know when all the other provisions would roll out, like, listing on the NASDAQ and whatnot, but I hear March could be when they start talking about some kind of bill.
Yeah, it'd be phenomenal.
So, yeah. Well, I agree. Sam, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find y'all's website and social media?
Connectedca.com is the website. And then Instagram is connected.california or Alien Labs.
Perfect. Hey, well, thanks again for your time, Sam. Look forward to watching the company grow and expand outside of the states that you're currently operating in, man. Thanks so much.
Totally. Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Yes. And thank you all for listening. Bye.